All right. We're a couple days out from the election here, and it's looking like Donald Trump has picked up a lot of steam. Kamala Harris, not so much. Now, that's not to say the election's put away, but things are looking good for Donald Trump. What I wanted to talk about is the number one issue that's been plaguing Kamala Harris, and that's the border. Joe Biden designated her the border czar. She was in charge, famously, of getting to the root causes of migration, whatever the hell that means. Should be pretty goddamn obvious why people want to come to the United States, but for some reason they needed to appoint Kamala Harris to do that. But anyways, she was in charge of the border. It's been a complete disaster. Joe Biden has been the worst president for border crossings. Some estimates are up to 10 million people came in the last 4 years. And it's really been an issue for Kamala Harris because there is no real explanation for why they would allow something like this. So I'm going to kind of walk us through the situation and then tell you guys why I think that the left is doing this and why Kamala Harris and Joe Biden and all the other shadowy people in the Democratic Party have decided that they were going to be for open borders. And so I think we got to start on day one of the Biden-Harris administration. What they did was they nullified nearly 60 of Donald Trump's executive orders regarding the border. And then what they did was when people started pouring in, all of the executive orders are taken away. Remain in Mexico is gone. Title 42 is gone, which was keeping people out of the country due to COVID. And so what began happening was people took the signal. They said, okay, the Biden-Harris administration is going to just let me into the country, no problem. So let's start moving up there. Let's go head over to the United States. The door is wide open. So border crossings quadrupled under the Biden administration compared to the Trump administration. And it's a big problem in this election because 61% of voters, according to Gallup, are saying that it is one of their top issues. In fact, it's the second most important issue just behind the economy, which, again, not a great topic for Kamala Harris, but we're going to save that for a different episode. So what was the strategy at all? What Kamala Harris said they were going to do was provide financial aid to struggling countries in South and Central America so that people didn't feel the need to come to the United States. Obviously, the biggest problem with these countries is they're extremely corrupt, so they stole all the foreign aid that we gave them, and people are still extremely poor there, and we're deciding that they were going to come up to the United States, which it's tough to blame these people who wouldn't want to come up and live in the United States if you're from like Honduras or Nicaragua or Venezuela, et cetera. All of us would do the same thing if we were in this situation. The fault lies with Kamala Harris and Joe Biden. So if you'll remember, about a year ago, there was this famous interview where Lester Holt is grilling Kamala Harris, and she's telling him, that she went to the border, and he tells her, no, you didn't go to the border. And then she says, well, I've never been to Europe, and the stupid answers that she gives. And she's had a ton of interviews like that where people are asking her, why aren't you going to the border? Why aren't you closing the border? This seems really simple. Donald Trump was able to do it with the stroke of a pen. Why can't you take care of this problem? And then eventually the answer transitioned to, well, we need Congress to act. We need Congress to act. And that's a complete lie. Congress did not act during the Trump administration. The exact same laws regarding immigration are on the books during the Trump administration as they are in the Biden-Harris administration. So this whole lie that they needed Congress to act, I mean, it's a crock of shit, and nobody should take that seriously. It's obviously not true. So what is to be done then for Kamala Harris in the campaign right now? It's a couple days out from the election. I think that she's toast. I think there is no way that she comes back from this. She's had no real answer as to why people are pouring into cities, not just in border states, because now these immigrants are being shipped up to the other, into northern cities, New York City, Chicago, et cetera. And they're having to deal with this crisis, this crisis created by Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. And it's really created a dynamic where, as Greg Abbott would say, all states are going to be border states now. If the federal government's policy is that they're just going to allow immigrants to pour over the border, then what those border states are going to do is they're going to send immigrants up into the states controlled by the Democratic Party, where this federal policy comes from. So why is this a bad thing? Why aren't Republicans just on board with millions of people coming into this country? And there are a lot of reasons, but the first one that I want to talk about is, for some reason, the Democratic Party has tried to claim the moral high ground here, that somehow it is the moral stance to have millions of people migrating from South America, Central America, up to the United States. And that is completely not true. The Republican Party has completely failed in messaging on this topic when it comes to taking the moral high ground, because the truth is there are a lot of people that get killed on the trip up here. There are a lot of people that are sexually assaulted. Human trafficking is a huge problem with the cartels. They're making millions and millions and millions of dollars just on these migrants. They're then using that money to manufacture drugs to send into the United States. They're using the money for guns. They're using the money to corrupt officials in Mexico. It is a really, really, really bad situation with the human cost of what it takes to allow this border to be open. So you've got this huge human trafficking issue. You have this huge sexual assault issue. You've got murders everywhere. The cartels are richer than they've ever been. And for some reason, the Democrats stand up and say it's racist to not want any of this. If you want to stop the human trafficking at our border, you're somehow a racist. And there are organizations that are helping in this. You should not be giving any money to the Red Cross. The Red Cross provides maps to people in Central America for how to get up through Mexico and get to the United States border. The Red Cross literally provides maps for human traffickers to smuggle people up into the United States, where all sorts of horrible things await them. They could be sold into sex slavery. Child labor slavery is something that's a problem here. Dr. Phil's reported on that. It is really, really, really bad stuff. And the Red Cross is aiding in that. And so is Kamala Harris and the Biden administration. They're encouraging all this, and none of it should be happening. It's a really sad situation, and there are a lot of victims of this. And those victims aren't hard to find. Again, Dr. Phil interviews a lot of people that are victims of the violence that occurs when people are migrating up here. And so I think that's something that the Republican Party should talk about more. There is no moral high ground if you are encouraging human trafficking. If your policies are increasing the amount of people coming across our border by quadruple, then you're doing something wrong. It is really bad stuff. And so there are also the political implications. So obviously we know that Kamala Harris is doing really poorly on this entire issue. It's a big issue for people, but it's not just the issue by itself of immigration. It's also the voter ID problem. So why does it matter for us to have voter ID laws? Well, most people here that live here are citizens. It's a felony to vote if you're not a citizen. So I don't know why people would do that is really the argument. But then all of a sudden you add 10 million more people that are not citizens into the country. And all of a sudden voter ID laws become really important. So you would think that the Democrats at least support some voter ID so that all these people coming in can't vote. But obviously, you're wrong. Democrats hate voter ID. And there's not a great way to check if these people who are coming across the border are using fake identification. Are these people actually voting? How do we know? Well, simple. If we had strict voter ID laws, then it would be really easy to say, no, you have to present a legitimate ID at the ballot box. You have to present proof of citizenship at a polling place. So we know these people aren't voting, but none of that's true, and that's mostly because Democrats oppose all of those different voter ID laws. So let's bring it back here to how does the left directly benefit? So I think short term, they know if they bring in 10 million people and even a fraction of those people end up in swing states and end up voting because of the Democrats' opposition to voter ID laws. Remember, these people from these countries tend to vote disproportionately for the Democrats. So if there is voter fraud going on, it is going to benefit the Democratic Party. And then that's just short term right there. And that's hard to measure. It's hard to prove, but we don't have, when people say, well, there's no proof of any large scale voter fraud. Well, we don't look for voter fraud. If you ask any different election official that is brought on to, any of these mainstream news sites, they will tell you they have no idea to tell if people are voting when they shouldn't be. There was just a story on Fox News about a Chinese citizen that voted in the Michigan election, and his ballot's going to count. They can't find it because there's no unique identifier on ballots, but they're secret ballots. So that illegal vote is going to count. And that's just one example among who knows how many thousands are out there that we're never going to know about. So that's just the short term. Okay. And that's the short-term election consequences and why Democrats have a reason to support a ton of illegal immigration and no voter ID laws. Second big one is that billionaires get access to cheap labor. We know that the ultra rich are also disproportionately Democrats, and they love to undercut labor laws. Democrats, for some reason, also like to champion minimum wage, and then at the same time, they turn around and they want to bring in foreign labor that will work really cheap because the living standards they're used to are not up to par with what Americans' living standards are and what Americans expect to be paid. So that labor can then undercut American workers and billionaires, and not just billionaires, but any rich corporation owner can then increase profits by having really cheap labor. So really rich billionaires, really rich Democrats, they love illegal immigration because it makes the labor pool unfairly competitive. So the next one, and I think this is the biggest one here, and this is the one that I really want to stress. It seems that Democrats are playing the long game. They know if they let 10 million illegal immigrants in now, all of those people in 10, 20 years, when they can pass an amnesty law, will then become voters. And they will vote disproportionately for the Democrats. Right now, Latinos seem to be swinging more towards Trump, more towards Republicans. So this strategy could backfire on them. But as of right now, they still disproportionately vote for Democrats. And it seems like the Democratic Party is really trying to increase their base by just bringing in more and more and more foreign nationals that will then eventually vote in our elections. And even if they can't pass that amnesty law, those people that have kids here, they are automatically citizens, and soon they will be voting in elections, and they are also more likely to vote Democrat than Republican. So I think this is actually a long view play to shift the demographics of the United States to ones that are more suitable for the Democratic Party. Again, that's going to be so far out in the future, it could come back to bite them in the ass. But this is their strategy. This is why they have the open borders. Everyone sits around and just says, well, we just can't imagine why the Democrats would flood the country with people that tend to vote for them. It should be pretty damn obvious why they do that. It's because those are their future voters. Now, there's also a secondary long-term strategy here, and I think that it has to do with the more extreme leftists. It has to do more with socialism. And that's if you shift the demographics of the United States to be less and less white, what that's going to do is make it easier to make the case for reparations. And right now we just talk about reparations for African Americans and slavery in the United States. But if more and more Latinos are brought in, you may talk about reparations for Mexican Americans because of the land seized from the Mexican-American War. I think that eventually you're going to see a reparations push for Chinese Americans in response to the Chinese Exclusion Act. You're going to find a push for reparations for Japanese Americans because of the internment, Native Americans because of all the crimes and horrific treatment that they endured. And eventually everybody is going to get this government reparations that will look more like a universal basic income, and less and less and less people will be excluded until it's just the small amount of white people. And then in the end, they'll then even include those white people for the I will call it like a reparations, but it's really just going to be this incremental universal basic income. That's how they're going to ease us into this socialist view of the United States, where it'll be the biggest wealth transfer that has ever been attempted. And I think that that's really their ultimate goal. And that's, I'm not saying that that's the goal, the stated goal of Kamala Harris, or that's the stated goal of any one of these politicians. But as far as these extreme leftists go, that we don't really see, they're part of the Democratic National Committee. They're these just kind of shadowy bureaucrats that don't get a lot of face time on the cameras, that won't come out and directly say this. That's the plan that they're moving towards, is just slowly pushing these demographics to be more and more and more in their favor. And honestly, I think it's going to backfire. I don't think that just because a certain racial group votes for Democrats now, that means they're going to vote for Democrats in 25 years. I think that this is a flawed view, but I think it's the view they're taking. It's the only explanation long-term I can think of why they would damage our country so badly for what seems to be so little short-term gain. They may lose the presidential election over this. And it seems like they wouldn't give up anything to stop Donald Trump, but they gave up this one in order to bring 10 million new future voters into this country. They're probably going to give up this presidential election. And that's the trade-off they decided to make. And hopefully it backfires on them, because it's diabolical, it's evil, and a lot of people are getting hurt because of it. So that's my take. I think that's why the Democrats push for open borders, and we'll see. Only time will tell.